Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's RC Maxfield here from the Back to 12 podcast. And in today's video, we'll discuss the Big 12 preseason media poll and where the Red Raiders were projected to finish. Is it too high, too low, just right? I'll let you know my opinion on that. And we'll also look at the entire preseason media poll. And I'll let you know who I think should be higher, looking at you in the state of Kansas, as well as who I think should be lower on the list. If you haven't already, be sure to like the video if you want more daily Texas Tech football videos. And also, I want to put this out there. During the season, we will be having a weekly video on the channel recapping everything in the Big 12, talking about who surprised us that week, who maybe isn't living up to expectations. We'll talk about that in a weekly video, so be sure to hit that subscribe button as well if you want to stay in the know on the Big 12 overall right here on the Back to 12 podcast channel. All right, let's jump into this. As last week, I was on my bachelor party trip, and well, listen, I didn't really talk that much when it came to making videos here on YouTube and talking about the Big 12 preseason media poll, and a couple of things stood out to me. But let's run through it and start at the bottom relatively quickly because I think they nailed it when it came to these three schools. West Virginia at 14, Cincy at 13, Houston at 12. Think they nailed it. I think that's perfect. And honestly, I think there's a pretty substantial gap between Cincy and West Virginia from 13 to 14. I think Neil Brown is coaching for his job. I'm not the only one that thinks that. I'm sure everybody else does too. And I just don't think West Virginia is very good. I just don't at all. It would be surprising to me if they won 4 games this year, truthfully. And their non-con schedule is doing them absolutely no favors either. I believe they play Penn State and Pittsburgh in non-con. Whew. Good freaking luck. All right. At 11, you've got BYU. I'd probably flip BYU and the team at number 10, which is Iowa State. I think BYU has a little bit more talent. Iowa State is trying to replace a lot of key impact players. Obviously, they lose a DN in the first round of the NFL draft. They also lose Xavier Hutchinson, one of the best wide receivers in the Big 12. That's a lot to replace. Right, so I'm interested to see what Matt Campbell does up there in Ames, but I probably would go the Cougars at 10, Iowa State at 11, but instead it's BYU at 11, Iowa State at 10. Then arguably my biggest, what are we doing on this list is Kansas at number 9. This is entirely too low, and I get it. You're going to look at the voting numbers. It's, I believe, 461 for Kansas, 463 for UCF, and then maybe just 470 for Oklahoma State. So it's close, right? Kansas deserves to be at least 7th in this, okay? When Jalen Daniels is healthy, he's arguably the best quarterback in the Big 12. You get Neal coming back. You got some guys on the offensive line coming back. Leipold has done a phenomenal job in Lawrence of building that program up. And you've got the preseason all Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year in Jalen Daniels. If he is healthy, Kansas is easily the 7th best team in the Big 12. And personally, I don't like to project injuries or anything like that. So I'm going to have Kansas at 7, even though they're at 9. I think Kansas is way too low, in my opinion. I'd have them at least at 7 in the Big 12 ranks, but they come in at number 9. UCF as at number 8. I'm cool with this. Personally, I think I'd probably just switch Kansas and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State comes in at 7. And I'll say this. They got one first-place vote. Whoever the hell gave Oklahoma State a first-place vote doesn't deserve to have a ballot. That's an atrocity. That is ridiculous. Just unbelievably dumb. They could surprise some people, but if this person truly thinks in the preseason that Oklahoma State is going to win the Big 12, when there's really nothing to go on off of that right now, I'm sorry, I just can't get behind it. That just felt like such a homer thing to do by a media member there. All right, number 6 is Baylor. Wholeheartedly agree with that. That's where I had Baylor as well. Now, things get interesting here at 4 and 5 because when you look at this, I was curious to see where would TCU land? Because, again, they made the college football playoff last year. I get they lost a lot of guys, right? You lose Miller in your backfield, Quentin Johnson, Steve Avila, Max Duggan. That's just on offense, right? And then you lose a guy in the secondary, LaDainian Tomlinson's nephew, right? You lose that guy as well. You've lost substantial pieces if you're TCU. But you could argue TCU had one of the best transfer portal classes in the country, right? Like they went out and got a guy in JoJo Earl from TCU and a couple other really solid pieces as well. I was interested to see where the Big 12 media members would place them in the poll. Would they say, oh, well, they made the playoff last year. Sure, they lost a lot, but we got to give them the benefit of the doubt and we got to put them in the top 4. They didn't. They instead have TCU at 5. And honestly, I think it's the right spot because I want to see what TCU looks like. And I want to see how they adjust with all these expectations coming down in terms of we made the college football playoff. Is there sort of a letdown, right? I know they lost a lot of guys and the team will look a little different. But remember, Chandler Morris was the guy that started their first game last year. And Max Duggan isn't playing football for TCU last year if Chandler Morris is healthy, right? He's now QB1 again for the Horned Frogs. I'm interested to see what happens there for, well, Dykes out there in Fort Worth. All right, let's talk about Texas Tech here. The Red Raiders get 4 first-place votes, come in at number 4 in the preseason media poll. And personally, I think this is exactly where they should be. You get 16, 17 starters back from your 22 on offense and defense, right? But I will say this. I am surprised because it's a what have you done for me lately type deal. But let's get to the chase right here in terms of just cutting right to it. This is a Joey McGuire effect. You look at what Texas Tech did to end the year last year, going 4-0, including the bowl game. You got Tyler Shuck healthy, who's 8-1 as a starter, right? Tech received 4 first-place votes. That's the same as Oklahoma, right? And I get it. Oklahoma and Texas, obviously, we haven't mentioned them yet. They're up there in the top 3. People are going to be upset about that. But truthfully, I thought Texas Tech was going to come in at 5 just because of that TCU aspect of things, but they are there at 4. And I think that's honestly where they should be, but I expected 5. So this is a really kind of a little bit of a surprise. But when you look at what Texas Tech has returning, I think it's absolutely warranted. And truthfully, I think Texas Tech could go higher than this in the poll. But preseason wise, in terms of what have you done for me lately, that 4-0 to end the season for Texas Tech has gone a long way, and I get it. It's a preseason media poll. There's somebody saying at the screen right now, RC, this really doesn't matter. Who cares where Texas Tech is ranked? Everything has to go onto the field. It does matter because this is a national relevancy type deal. Texas Tech is going to get talked about more, and getting talked about more is a good thing, right? Having more eyeballs on your program is a good thing. Now, obviously, you have to live up to those expectations on the field, and Joey McGuire and crew have done nothing short of that so far. So I have no reason to expect they won't this season, right? But you return 16 to 17 starters from offense and defense. Yes, you should be this high, especially the way that you finished last year. All right, let's round out the top half of this, and it's Oklahoma at 3. They received 4 first-place votes. Texas Tech only 28 points behind them. Pretty interesting right there. 29. Kansas State comes in at 2 with 14 first-place votes, and then Texas at number 1 with 41 first-place votes. Kind of makes sense. Personally, I have Kansas State winning the Big 12. That's kind of how I view things. I just think they've done a phenomenal job, and I'm higher than most on Will Howard. But I want to ask you guys specifically about Texas Tech, okay? They come in at number 4 in the preseason Big 12 media poll. Is that too high, too low, or just right? Again, from top to bottom, we've got Texas, Kansas State, Oklahoma, Texas Tech, TCU, Baylor, Oklahoma State, UCF. Then you go to Kansas, which is too low in my opinion, Iowa State. Then you've got BYU, pretty big drop-off. And then you've got Houston, Cincinnati, and West Virginia. But the main question I want to ask you guys before we get out of here, Texas Tech comes in at number 4 in the Big 12 preseason media poll. Is that too high, too low, or just right? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button to stay in the know on Texas Tech football all year long. We've got breaking news, whether that's on the field, recruiting trail, whatever it may be. We've got you covered on your one-stop shop for everything Texas Tech football and Big 12 football. Of course, I'm talking about the Back to 12 podcast channel.